what we have is, at the moment, of course, is we have a credit crisis. We have a crisis of credit. We've had free money for decades now, and of course the debts are unrepayable. Basically, everyone is in default. The banks are in default, countries are in default, the banks are insolvent, the central banks are insolvent. Now, when you say who actually controls it, are we actually looking for a family like the Rothschilds, who are certainly in there somewhere, the oligarchs who then buy? So you have Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post. You have Bill Gates, who owns the Guardian newspaper here, which isn't a particularly good newspaper or popular newspaper, but it feeds straight into national broadcasting. If they're going to run anything today and every morning, it's the Guardian they read, and so they set the agenda. It's very difficult to find out actually who controls everything. So even in the Daily Telegraph, supposed to be an independent newspaper, you find that Bill Gates is controlling their medical pages. He's controlling their all sorts of other pages. And so the control, you have a view, let's say, you have an ethos of world government. They want world government. They want a centralized world government. And there are enough of them to actually control the mainstream media. And I would argue that the biggest defense that we have in a free society is a free press. We haven't had a free press for years. And I think the sacking of Tucker Carlson just proved that beyond almost any doubt.
No, it goes
but the BBC has been a government statement. And if it comes to foreign policy, for example, you can actually see British journalists on BBC, you can see their eyes flicker along the prompt screen reading the CIA press release.
Welcome to my show. My name is Keyvan. I have the honor, pleasure to have Mr. Godfrey Bloom on my show for the first time. Let me just turn off the YouTube so we don't have an echo. Godfrey, thank you so much for your time. We'll make it short because I know you're under pretty much time pressure today. Perhaps we can, follow up on our some of the topics I really want to talk to you about in the future. Welcome to the show, Godfrey. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you very much. A pleasure to be on your show.
Godfrey, I read your book, by the way, just shortly a couple of days ago. Really impressed. I mean, I do know you. I've listened to some of your speeches. It's like so many years ago. And as you know yourself, it went like super viral. I guess tens of millions of people already watched it. It was in the European Parliament, your speeches about central banks and how broke they are, and the whole cesspool of corruption and fraud. What I want to talk to you about, in essence, today is because my listeners and followers, I mean, they are pretty familiar, because it's a Bitcoin focused podcast about money and inflation and the systemic problems with the monetary financial structure. And I know from your curriculum vitae, I'm going to put all the, your resume, your curriculum vitae, your website down below on my podcast, on the show notes. Since you also worked in the City of London, what I'm a little bit curious about is if you can share. I mean, if you do have insights about, like, to get like sort of a broader, comprehensive understanding, a bigger picture of the control structures, monetary financial control structures, whether we're talking about City of London, Bank of International Settlements, the central banks in general, the banks, and fiat money, fiat monetary system, and everything, all the symptoms and tentacles that come out of it, whether it be systemic theft, systemic corruption, systemic criminality, that's been going on right now. I mean, it's in plain sight. Can you share, I mean, your opinion, your overview, so what people might, get a sense of it, like who controls whom? I mean, we could also talk about the crown, the legacy of the crown, how much land they control all over the world. I know it's like millions and millions of square kilometers. But I've never I've been deep into the rabbit hole. I've read like books, The Creature of Jekyll Island by Griffin, or Eustace Mullins, The Secrets of Federal Reserve. I've, studied books about the Bank of International Settlements. You know where I'm going with this, Godfrey. So what is the bigger picture?
Well, I think the problem that we have is the removal of the concept of hard money. And that's where it all starts. Okay, this is where it actually starts. So let's say we go back, we don't want to sort of go back too far in history because then it just eats into time. Although I'm always happy to do that if there is time, which sadly there never is. But for example, if you go back to the Napoleonic Wars, and which finished at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, we then return to the gold standard. We come off the gold standard in order to pay for the war, as everybody does. If you want to pay for a war in historical terms, you come off the gold standard. And this is something that Henry VIII did for his war. He added alloy or clipped coins, so on and so forth. He was followed, of course, by Queen Elizabeth I, who then tried to restore the concept of hard money. And in came Thomas Gresham, her chancellor, whose, of course, famous quotation is, "Bad money drives out good." Gresham Street is still there. The Bank of England came into fruition over a relatively slow period of time and was not a state-sponsored bank as it is today. So when we went back onto the gold standard after the Napoleonic War, we then stayed on the gold standard until 1914, of course, when the Great War, as we refer to it in Britain, is called the Great War. And it's interesting that the staple diet, the price of a loaf of bread, was the same in 1816 as it was in 1913. So nearly 100 years, we didn't have inflation because you can't inflate gold money. There are other dynamics involved in that, like the repeal of the Corn Laws and so on and so forth. But I don't think we need to get sidetracked by that. So if you have hard money, it can't inflate. It's impossible to inflate it. And that doesn't matter whether you argue for gold or you argue for Bitcoin. Governments can't inflate it to pay for wars. And then, of course, we saw we came off the gold standard in 1914 in order to pay for our wars and brought in something called the Bradbury Pound and various other things. We came off it again during the recession and the depression in the 1930s. And when we tried to restore the gold standard, we came back at the pre-war pre-war cost of gold, which was ridiculous. And people blamed returning to the gold standard. It was returning to the gold standard at the wrong price. That was the problem. Anyway, we fast forward all that. And then, of course, we have the 1971 closing of the gold window by Nixon, again, coming off the gold standard, surprise to price, for pay for another war, the war in Vietnam. And you have to come off, you have to inflate the currency or cheat the currency in order to pay for war. And of course, that causes inflation, that causes monetary inflation, which feeds through to price inflation. And that's exactly what we've seen now. And so we've seen, for example, in gold, we've seen the degradation just since the turn of this century, which is only 23 years ago, the fall in the purchasing power of the dollar against gold into the tune of something like 96%. It is quite astonishingly how degraded our currency has been. And of course, politicians had through their central bank, and this is not just true of Britain, of course, this is true of America, it's true of the European Central Bank, it's true of the Japanese Central Bank. They have a machine that can print money. That's the simplicity of it. It's a machine that can print money. Now, even if we were a saint, even if I were a saint and you were a saint, and you had that machine and said, I will never use it for bad purposes, I will only use it for the good of mankind, you sooner or later you would be tempted and you would persuade yourself you were doing the good of mankind because you needed a new car, or your mother was ill, or whatever it is. And of course, political considerations. Now, to turn this money-making machine over to politicians who are inherently sociopaths or criminals is madness. Of course, they print it, and they print the money to pay for their friends, pay for their index-linked pensions, to pay for all the freebies, their mates, and all the things that go with that, and their wars, constant wars, and the United States is the worst offender of the lot. They have been at war with somebody since 1776, the War of Independence, with everybody, with the exception of 16 years. They're at war with everybody all the time. They never stop. It's as militaristic in America today as the Prussians were in the late 1890s. It is a militaristic empire. And the only way you can do that is by printing money. Especially if you degrade your manufacturing base, which of course what the Americans have done, subcontracted their manufacturing base to the Far East, China. So you have all these things which are degrading money in people's pockets, and of course I'm sure your audience will be familiar with the concept of the Cantillon effect. Everybody is happy. At the beginning, if you already have assets and they're inflated, so if you own great swathes of property, or if you own precious metals, or you own all these things and they go up in value, you're okay. But if you're at the back of the queue, and Cantillon explained this, the French economist, worth looking up if any of your audience or my audience have not looked this up, I'm sure they have, because we both have slightly boutique audiences. You know, we're always slightly preaching to the choir on these things. Otherwise, they wouldn't be following us, or they wouldn't be subscribers. So that's always a problem, because it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of the people don't understand any of this, which is why they're constantly caught out. And so people get a little bit entangled sometimes with the concept of the City of London. The City of London is governed under its regulatory system by an enabling act, which is done by Parliament. So it's actually done by Parliament. So they have to follow the rules and regulations just the same way as that Wall Street has to follow the SEC and various other things, other regulatory bodies. Now, the problem is, of course, they're fake. The regulatory bodies are fake. What actually happens is it's self-regulation, and so it's run for the benefit of the people who are regulated. And it's just the same now when it comes to Big Pharma, the MHRA and all the rest of it. It's run, Big Pharma regulates itself. The World Health Organization regulates itself by the oligarchs who are in Big Pharma and the health systems that benefit from it. So everything is fake. You know, and when people say, oh, it's been peer reviewed, or this has been peer reviewed, or that's been passed by the FDI or the MHRA, or thing, no, it's fake. It's fake. And of course, unless you drill down and find out about it, you don't realize how fake it is. But we do have these quirks, which are sometimes built up a little more than they need to be. For example, let's take the Parliament, let's take Black Rod. Since the time of rejecting Charles I's entry into Parliament now, Black Rod has to knock on the door in order to come in to Parliament to deliver what is known as the Queen's Speech, which will now be the King's Speech, of course. Mm-hmm. He has to knock. He cannot just come in. And there are same protocols with the City of London. But they are nearly 1,000 years old, and that is really part of the tradition. They don't mean anything they don't mean a lot in real terms. It isn't an important factor, because already the system is so corrupt. It doesn't matter. You know, you don't have to look back over 1,000 years to a protocol to actually enforce these things. It's already there in spades. So this is the problem that we have. And of course, both here in Great Britain and in North America, in the United States, you have a choice. You either vote red or you vote blue. And of course they all sing off the same hymn sheet. They are the same people. Exactly. The leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer here, and our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, who's an ex-Goldman Sachs guy, who are all corrupt. I mean, Goldman Sachs is the fundamental definition of banking corruption. Yeah. And so this is one of the problems that we have, and they always end up in the seats of power, and they are World Economic Forum agents. So we now have a situation, for example, where our new king is a World Economic Forum agent. He's quite open about it. It's not a conspiracy theory. He is constantly on the Davos platform explaining how we are not entitled to make decisions anymore for our own lives. We're not capable of doing that. And he and his ilk at the WEF have to make these decisions for us. We have a Prime Minister. We have a Chancellor of the Exchequer who's WEF. We have an Archbishop of Canterbury the Archbishop of Canterbury is a self-confirmed disciple, if I may use that word for him, a disciple of the World Economic Forum. And that kicks you into what is a secular society, what isn't a secular society, and how people will use certain things like fake science is the main thing. It's all for our own benefit. We have to have all these injections. We have to have these experimental jobs for our own benefit. The world's going to boil if we drive our cars and all this kind of thing. 20% of us, 100% of your audience and 100% of my audience know this is fake.
Right.
But 80% of the people, you only need 80% of the population to go with you in a democracy. That's all you need.
Yeah,
you need
the
80%
indoctrination is just too deep. The indoctrination and, the superficiality and the brainwashing has been, I mean, they've done a tremendous job, to be honest with you. I mean, they've done really. But since you mentioned Prince Charles, I mean, I see him as sort of a symbol or representative of the crown. And he's a puppet. But can I ask you that straightforward? Do you think Prince Charles is being extorted? Like, I mean, you know exactly where I'm going with this, with all the child trafficking, pedophilia that's going on and systematically. Do you think Prince Charles is just another puppet who is being blackmailed? Or is it just, or does he really have some say? Is that really his ideology to become, I don't know, more powerful or more, I don't know, to be more in control of the Great Reset? That's what they call it.
You asked me a question I've asked myself a million times. It's very difficult to know where some of these people are just incredibly gullible, stupid, ignorant, naive, to go with this. It's extremely difficult, and I really can't make up my mind, and people will have to make up their own mind. But it goes the same with these people who have not been challenged. For example, if you are the King of England, you have spent your entire life not being challenged, surrounded by sycophants, saying, yes, that was wonderful, yes, you're marvelous, so on and so forth. And so nobody says, just a minute, I listened to your speech on climate change, and it was so hopelessly full of technical holes, it was unbelievable. Your Majesty, you really ought to take some time out to actually learn your subject before you go on TV. Now, I was in a private hearing with King Charles, the Prince of Wales, as he then was, when I was a member of the European Parliament. It was quite a small gathering, and he was giving one of these, talks on climate change and so on and so forth, and how the world was going to boil in 6 years if we didn't all, do what we've got to do and net zero and all the rest of it. And before we went in, we were told that under no circumstances could we interrupt, ask a question from the floor. He was allowed to give his talk without any form of interruption whatsoever and then depart. And the only way I could get back at this was to pack the front row with my friends and my researchers, because we couldn't ask questions and we couldn't interrupt. So every time he said something, the world's going to boil in 6 years and all this kind of thing, we all roared with laughter. It was our way of getting at him, and it certainly did disconcert him. And there's a clip, just literally a clip he made only less than a year ago, when he's saying, oh, the world's going to boil, this is mine. And he said without any sense of irony, and I've been saying this now, I've been banging this drum for nearly 40 years. The world's, with no sense of irony. And nobody's there saying, if you've been saying this for 40 years, when is it exactly going to happen? When is it going to happen? You've just told us that for the last 40 years it hasn't happened, but it's going to happen. When is it you actually get off your soapbox and say, goodness me, I think I've made a mistake. I've obviously got this wrong. So
and it has tradition. I mean, it goes back to the Club of Rome, Malthusian, agenda. I mean, my audience knows pretty much, but I think it's still important, I think, to somehow, review the ideology and the agenda behind it. What Prince Charles is just regurgitating.
The king and his father were Malthusians. There's no question about that. They all believe, of course, and it was interesting, even Her Majesty, just 2 years ago, when we were in the middle of the lockdown, the bits and pieces, she said, we're going to have to change the way we do things. And of course, she didn't mean her. She meant me and my neighbors and my family, not her. These people never mean them.
Unbelievable.
So they continue to expand their family, have lots and lots of children, have lots of private aeroplanes, lots of cars, lots of palaces, lots of castles. They're not going to change the way they're going to. And when did you last see a political interviewer or any interviewer say, what personal sacrifices are you going to make, Your Majesty, yourself? How many palaces are you going to close? How many aeroplanes are you going to discard? Are you going to start traveling around the globe on ordinary scheduled airlines? Nobody ever says things. So he continues in this bubble of his own. So when you ask me, is he mad, naive, gullible, evil, stupid? The question is, so we don't really know. I think it's probably a mixture of all of them.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you mentioned also the central banks and okay, so we always hear about the Rothschilds, but I think Rothschild is just one. I mean, they are still very, very powerful puppet masters. With its now 10 or hundreds of trillions of wealth they control. What I'm interested in, there's a tentacles, military-industrial complex, the corporate complex, the intelligence complex. Is there a picture you can draw where we can connect the dots? I mean, are there any like faceless entities or individuals, families that are controlling the central bank, even the Federal Reserve? The Federal Reserve, I mean, is privately owned, as we know, right? So who controls the Federal Reserve? Do we have the faces, the owners, the names? No, we don't, right?
No, we don't know. We only know the people who are really up front, don't we? We know about George Soros. We know about Bill Gates. We know about Jeff Bezos. We know about all these people.
But these are just bureaucrats. These are just handlers. These are just, operatives. I mean, they are rich and wealthy and, in a way powerful. But that's why the title of this episode is Who Controls the Money? The monetary fiat system, which is the central banking system.
Well, let's look at it from a slightly different angle. What we have is, at the moment, of course, is we have a credit crisis. We have a crisis of credit. We've had free money for decades now, and of course the debts are unrepayable. Basically, everyone is in default. The banks are in default, countries are in default, so, the banks are insolvent, the central banks are insolvent. Now, when you say who actually controls it, are we actually looking for a family like the Rothschilds, who are certainly in there somewhere, the oligarchs who then buy? So you have Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post. You have Bill Gates, who owns the Guardian newspaper here, which isn't a particularly good newspaper or popular newspaper, but it feeds straight into national broadcasting. If they're going to run anything today and every morning, it's the Guardian they read, and so they set the agenda. It's very difficult to find out actually who controls everything. So even in the Daily Telegraph, supposed to be an independent newspaper, you find that Bill Gates is controlling their medical pages. He's controlling their all sorts of other pages. And so the control, you have a view, let's say, you have an ethos of world government. They want world government. They want a centralized world government. And there are enough of them to actually control the mainstream media. And I would argue that the biggest defense that we have in a free society is a free press. We haven't had a free press for years. And I think the sacking of Tucker Carlson just proved that beyond almost any doubt.
No, it goes
but the BBC has been a government statement. And if it comes to foreign policy, for example, you can actually see British journalists on BBC, you can see their eyes flicker along the prompt screen reading the CIA press release.
Yeah.
You can actually see it. And I've been on television before, and breakfast TV, and I went across and put my hand over it. I said, no, look at me, talk to me, don't read the CIA press release. Well, Syria in particular, and various other things in the Middle East, and nobody's talking about Libya ever again. So it may be a little bit difficult to actually suggest who is individually running this. But when you've got a syndicate, which includes the King of England, the Prime Minister of England, the Fed, the ECB, world leaders who are openly boasted about by Carl Schwab that he's infiltrated cabinets all across the world, Australia, who does exactly what they're told, foreign policy with Great Britain, we do exactly what Washington tells us to do. Is there any one person or one family or one group? I think it's a sort of a a globalist ethos, which so many people of massive influence share, I'm not sure that you can pin it down to one person or a number of persons, like, dare I suggest, something like Moriarty from the Sherlock Holmes whodunits, one figure of evil. Right. I think that would be too simplistic.
It's more nuanced, definitely. Yeah, it's a little bit more complex. But I'm always, being curious because, the first time I understood that these institutions, entities, or, would it be the Bank of International Settlements and their members and other, institutions are not accountable, criminally immune, and they're above the law. I mean, there's even a speech, not a speech, an interview with Alan Greenspan where he said, who's above, he was talking about the Federal Reserve, that there is nothing above the Federal Reserve. It makes its own, it's above the law. It is, it was implying the Federal Reserve is above the law. And that shocked me for the first time to understand, they're criminal immune. They are untouchable. And that's something where I'm like, okay, what's a cesspool of corruption and unaccountability? I mean, even the justice system. There are lawyers, who say in Germany, the justice system is lost. I mean, they're either totally dependent or they are being, bribed, corrupted, extorted, or just under control, So there's no independent judiciary anymore. You know what I'm saying? These are the tentacles I was talking about.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's the same in Britain. Since the era of Tony Blair, all senior judicial appointments are politicized. All senior civil service appointments are politicized. I spent a little time in the army myself years ago, not with any great distinction, I have to add. But I can tell you, you cannot get above the rank of full colonel without being politically approved.
Right.
So you have wokery in the army. So your generals have to pay lip service to ludicrous things like the war in the Ukraine, the transgender in the army, pretending that isn't going to affect units' ability, the destruction of Crown immunity when it came to the army justice system, which was a very good justice system. That's been taken out, that's been deferred, that's been put forward to the European Court of Human Rights, which is a totally political unit, as you know. I mean, that's a political judiciary with relatively junior judges who, in our level of judiciary here, would be no higher than probably district judge, or what we used to call a stipendiary magistrate. Very junior. These aren't the great legal minds of yesteryear that we used to have in this country. So we've degraded the principles of English law. We've degraded the education system. I have lectured to third-year economics and history undergraduates at Cambridge, Oxford, Durham, some of the greatest scholars, and I can tell you that they know nothing about their entitlement under our constitution. They don't even think we have a constitution. They've never really heard about the 1688 Bill of Rights, the Tolerance Act, the Act of Settlement, the principles of English law. You do not get an education at a British university. You go to play rugby, have pasties and drink beer, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. I love all of that myself. But now, if I lecture at Warsaw School of Economics, which I have done, you're dealing with people who can speak 3 languages, discuss all aspects of economics, and if you go for a drink with them, they can discuss Napoleon's campaigns in the peninsula. If you went to a Warsaw university, you're properly educated. If you went to an English or American university, you're just dumb.
Right. And, the school system and educational system, it's a can of worm by itself. I mean, we could talk for hours, because, I went to a very conservative, very, elite school, and then went to university, studied law. But, at the end of the day, there's lots of people like me. I'm like, after many decades, I'm like asking myself, what have I really learned? Have I really learned to question anything? Have we learned anything about about the taboo topics, about money? We haven't learned anything, to be honest with you. It's just, so you become an accepted member of society. That's all, or this matrix, So the 5 minutes or 4 minutes or 6 minutes we have left. Okay, I know. I mean, it's just a compressed question, but still, what would you say if we do achieve, whether we're talking about gold or Bitcoin, a transitional combination between gold and Bitcoin? permissionless, truly decentralized, unconfiscatable, totally detached from the system. So you don't have to fight the system, as Buckminster Fuller said. Don't fight the system, create a new model, a new system in order to make the old one obsolete. What if we achieve this? Do you think we've finally achieved this point where all these tentacles become by itself obsolete? The criminality, the systemic corruption, theft,
Yes, I think you've got a point. I think we need to detach ourselves from it, and we are, of course, there's a number of dynamics that we're looking at. We have Bitcoin, of course, where the Bitcoiners understood that you need to get out of a state-run system. Of course you do. I've been a gold bug for most of my latter life, for the last 30 years anyway. I'm a gold bug. I do not buy this Bitcoin versus gold. I think that's fake. It's a fake argument. They're complementary. They both get us out of the state system. And I get annoyed when I get teenage Bitcoiners come onto me and say, oh, you don't know anything about Bitcoin. You don't understand Bitcoin. And you've got an ancient relic and it's an old piece of rock. This is just childish. We are both following the same goals because
it's the same properties, scarcity. We're talking about scarcity. I mean, that's one common, I would say, one essential commonality. It's the scarcity, or let's say relative or absolute scarcity, right?
Exactly. It doesn't matter particularly whether you believe in Bitcoin or whether you believe in gold. What we both believe in is that you don't want to be involved in the state system because they will rob you because they're criminals. Now, of course, the other dynamic, which is just coming on stream, is the BRICS nations are taking the same view. This isn't just you and me and our subscribers and our friends and people who agree with us. We have the biggest block of people, of population on the planet now, the BRICS, which outweigh number-wise the West, saying, no, we don't want this. They've weaponized the dollar. We don't trust the American system. We don't trust fiat currencies. We don't trust Western central banks. All of this, which we have brought on ourselves, they're saying we're going to have a new, and we don't quite know how it's going to work yet. It's not, we don't quite know, but they're talking about having the yuan or the ruble or interchangeable, and it's going to be, in part gold backed. It looks like it's going to be gold backed because the central banks are buying gold, and that's your giveaway. Now, where I believe that is going to change the dynamic, because it's going to mean there's a very easy way of getting yourself out of the system. It's much easier because there's no reason to stop you trading in yuan or rubles or a hard asset-backed currency. You can do that, and that's going to be a lot easier. And what I was hoping, and it hasn't yet, what would be a really big step forward for Bitcoin, and I have held Bitcoin. I'm a believer in Bitcoin being a very good concept. But what we have to have is an acceptance generally as money, which is a medium of exchange. It has to be an internationally accepted medium of exchange. And I've had this sort of discussion before in a helpful and constructive way. I've been to most capitals in the world. That's not because I'm clever, it's because I'm old. I've been to sort of New York, Buenos Aires, Delhi, Zurich. I've been all over the world in my lifetime. I expect you've seen an awful lot of it too. I can go to any posh hotel in the world and I can tip a sovereign, an English gold sovereign, to the concierge and get exactly what I like.
Yeah,
he will go away into the and make.
The only question sometimes I have to Godfrey is like, how do you assay the authenticity, the purity of gold? That's the thing, because with Bitcoin, I mean, it's in plain sight, it's in real time, it's on the blockchain, and there it is. It's 100% proof. But with gold, it's like, I don't know. Can I trust you? I mean, is this pure? Is this authentic? Is it really?
Well, this is what I like about coin rather than bullion. I like coin. Because that's all really been done for you. Yes, you could fake the coins, but I use Sharps Pixley in London, and occasionally, if I want to cash a bar, I just go up the stairs. It takes a nanosecond for their machine to tell me that that's
right. Okay.
Right. Yeah. It takes seconds. It takes seconds.
I'm talking about the individual. Like, can you do it like on a day-to-day basis? Like.
Well, yeah, it's pretty easy. But we're talking about people with a portfolio, people, Middle England, the professional man. there's not much you can do to help people who don't have any money to start with. You know, they don't have anything to start with. So there's not much you can do. But if you're a professional man, I'm just an ordinary professional man in England with a small holding here in Yorkshire, with a few chickens and a few horses and bits and pieces. I'm just an ordinary middle guy.
Yeah.
And I can make gold work perfectly well for me. And I've got an account with Baird, I've got an account with Pure Gold, I've got an account with Sharps Pickling. I can pick the phone up. It's insured, it's safe stored, not with a bank, which the government own and can bust into whenever they want. No, an independent safe deposit box. I can phone them up and I say, I need to sell £50,000 worth of gold. They will transfer that money the next day. It's really very easy.
Exactly.
And so Bitcoin, gold, it is actually easy. And of course, we're now living in a situation where you try and get £50,000 out of your bank now. Go to your bank or £20,000 and ask you what you want it for.
Oh my God. Yeah. No.
Oh yeah.
No, it's not yours. It's not yours. It's an IOU.
No,
exactly.
But they can't do that if you have an independent gold account with a reputable people like Baird, Pure Gold. There's lots, and there's quite a few in.
Right.
And on the spreads, just a very quick word about the spreads. For those of you who are interested, and I know Bitcoiners are interested in gold and gold bugs, they're interested in Bitcoin because it's flip side of both what we believe in. I've arranged with a bullion dealer in London, very reputable, that they will buy your gold back at spot. The guarantee they'll buy back at spot. So yes, you pay a 3% premium when you're buying your piece of gold or your gold coin. That's how they make their turn. That's a legitimate business. I don't have an issue. Nobody should have an issue with that. Okay. But when you want to sell it back to them, they will give you spot price. That means you're not taking a 3% hit on your sale. So you're only really dealing with a 3% bid. Well, that's the same as, that's smaller than a unit trust, an investment trust, or a stock or a bond. So it is a very sophisticated world. And as I say, the key is, if I had that gold, it's got to be recognized. It has to really be a Krugerrand or a sovereign or something like that is instantly recognized as being so. And certainly, your concierge or your hotel manager will be very happy to take that, especially in India. Believe me, if you've got the nerve to take a gold sovereign into India. Yeah,
there's a lot of so many people.
It is accepted money. It is accepted. It's an accepted medium of exchange. I'm looking forward to the day when Bitcoin is too. And I thought the breakthrough would come with Elon Musk when he said, "I will sell you your car for Bitcoin, transfer Bitcoin, and I'll sell you the car." I was hoping every car dealer would do the same. That would be an enormous breakthrough for Bitcoin as a true medium of exchange.
It's going to happen, and it's happening. I mean, on the second layer and the third layer, I mean, it's super advanced right now. It's the pace of development. But Godfrey, I know you're under time pressure. I'm going to let you go, but there's so many subtopics. I know you're a military expert also, and you're Austrian economist. I want to talk to you about Hoppe, about the essence and nature of the government, the nation state, whether it's relevant or irrelevant at all. But maybe we can follow up sometime. I don't know, maybe in a couple of months or whenever you have some time. That would be great.
Absolutely. I'd love to if you email me or Patrick, who's my techie guy. We picked up your email. It got lost in the bucket.
It's like so long time ago. I know.
But yes, I'd love to talk to you again. Let's book it in for 6 weeks' time or something.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and appreciate your time.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
All right. That was Godfrey Bloom, legendary Austrian economist, former member of parliament and author, amazing man. I just wanted to screen share. Let me just put this on screen share. Here you go. That's his website. That's godfreybloom.uk, where you can also read his resume or curriculum vitae, all his articles, his publications, everything else. And then the last book I read is a pretty, compact and short book, but really amazing. It's for the layman or laywoman, The Magic of Banking: The Coming Collapse. So that was a really fascinating but dense conversation with Godfrey Bloom. Hope you were able to take something out of it and internalize it. I was going to go deeper, talk about Bitcoin, about his comprehension and how he's, sees the world in a hyper Bitcoinized world, how he sees it, with or on a gold standard. What could the world look like? But we'll see. Hopefully, we'll have another follow-up conversation in the next few months. My name is Keyvan Davani. I'm the host of the Keyvan Davani Connection Show. And let me know your thoughts, your questions, and any other ideas, inspirations for the next chat. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Bye.